Hello, and welcome to another director review. I want to first start off by apologizing if you hear any rain or thunder or lightning in the background, because there's a thunderstorm as I'm recording this. Hopefully it doesn't come across too loud on the microphone. Today I'll be reviewing John Hughes' films, since one of them is on my Criterion challenge for this year. I'm thinking that I will either need to do a series on those films or try watching more films at a time to try to finish it by the end of the year. I can't believe we're nearing the halfway point of this year, or actually we may have passed the halfway point, so I still have quite a few. I think I've only done 11 or 12 of 52, so I've got a long way to go. The films I'll be reviewing in this video include 16 Candles from 1984, The Breakfast Club from 1985, Weird Science from 1985 as well, Ferris Bueller's Day Off from 1986, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles from 1987, and Uncle Buck from 1989. I've left off She's Having a Baby from 1988 and Curly Sue from 1991 due to their being quite poor reviews for those films on IMDb. Usually I try to aim for, in these director reviews, only movies that are around a 6.5, maybe more like 7 and above. I'll only go under the 7 for things that are maybe a little bit more well regarded in some other way. I've also left off all of his other work writing and producing, but not directing, although I have seen some of those films and may see more of them at some point. Without any further ado, let's get started with 16 Candles. With the occasion all but overshadowed by her sister's upcoming wedding, angst-ridden Samantha faces her 16th birthday with typical adolescent dread. Samantha pines for a studly older boy, Jake, but worries that her chastity will be a turn-off for the popular senior. Meanwhile, Samantha must constantly rebuff the affections of nerdy Ted, the only boy in school, unfortunately, who seems to take an interest in her. This is available for rent or purchase in both Canada and the United States. I was really enjoying this movie at the beginning. I thought it was quite hilarious and had great music. That is, until they bring in a racist, stereotypical Asian caricature by the name of Long Duck Dong. Every time they mention him, or he shows up unexpectedly, they play a gong sound effect, and the caricature also features a stereotypical accent. They're also quite casual about sexual assault, with one of the characters saying, "I could violate her 10 different ways if I wanted to," in relation to his drunk girlfriend who's passed out on his bed. As well as the geek supposedly having sex with Caroline, a cheerleader, while she is drunk and thinking he was Jake, her boyfriend. Despite those flaws, and I'm not even mentioning the slurs that they used in this movie that wouldn't be accepted in modern times, there was a great scene near the end where Samantha and her dad talk on the sofa about love and life. That scene just shows what this movie could have been, and if there was a studio wanting to remake it for today's audience, they could hopefully make something without the racism and misogyny of the 1980s. I would have rated this quite highly, but in the end, couldn't justify giving it more than a 2.5 out of 5. Now let's move on to The Breakfast Club. 5 high school students from different walks of life endure a Saturday detention under a power-hungry principal. The disparate group includes Rebel John, Princess Claire, Outcast Allison, Brainy Brian, and Andrew the Jock. Each has a chance to tell his or her own story, making the others see them a little differently. And when the day ends, they question whether school will ever be the same. This is available for streaming on Netflix in Canada or on Fubo TV and Hulu in the US. I have seen many references and homages to this film, from Victorious, a Nickelodeon kids show, to Community, their pilot episode in particular, and How I Met Your Mother, where they all dress as Bender for Halloween. Finally, I have seen the source material that those projects reference. This film effectively used comedy in the awkward silences. Despite this being a teen comedy, it also is quite dramatic, and each of the characters have their own arc to grow and learn together. I will mention there is usage of a homophobic slur, fat phobia, and talk of suicide that may be triggering for some viewers. Overall, I enjoyed this movie and could see myself watching it again. I rated this a 4 out of 5. Now let's move on to Weird Science. Teen misfits Gary and Wyatt design their ideal woman on a computer, and a freak electrical accident brings her to life in the form of a lovely superhuman, Lisa. She outfits Gary and Wyatt in cool clothes, surprises them with a Porsche, and helps them stand up to jerks Ian and Max. But all the while, the boys must hide Lisa's existence from Chet, Wyatt's nightmare of a big brother. This is available for rent or purchase in Canada and the United States. This film is a teenage male fantasy. It is also the least grounded of John Hughes' directorial efforts. I was not a fan of the comedic elements, and there wasn't great dramatic elements to balance them out like in his other films. I also had a problem with Gary Wallace, played by Anthony Michael Hall, using a black scent during the club scene, and the predatory nature of the relationship between Lisa and the two teenage boys. So for those reasons, I rated this a 2 out of 5. Now let's move on to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ferris Bueller has an uncanny skill at cutting classes and getting away with it. Intending to make one last duck out before graduation, Ferris calls in sick, borrows a Ferrari, and embarks on a one-day journey through the streets of Chicago. On Ferris's trail is high school principal Rooney, determined to catch him in the act. This is available for streaming on Starz and Paramount Plus in Canada, as well as Paramount Plus in the United States. So I watched this film back in December of 2020 and chose not to rewatch it for this video. That's not because I didn't enjoy the movie, but since I'd already seen it recently enough that I could remember how I felt about it, I just didn't feel that I needed to rewatch this. And most of my videos on this channel are first-time watches. I enjoyed the comedic and dramatic elements of the story. In comparison to the previous movies, I can't remember anything problematic about this movie, other than maybe Charlie Sheen showing up, but that's not really a big deal. I think my expectations going into it were a bit high, considering this is a classic film from the 1980s, and at the time I saw it, my parents, who were in their 20s at the time of release, mentioned how much they enjoyed this movie and how well it holds up. My rating may go up when I do rewatch this film, but for now I rated it a 3.5 out of 5. One of the things I should let you know about my rating system is even if I rate two movies the same score, each score can be on the high end of that spectrum or on the lower end of that spectrum. With that out of the way, let's move on to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Easily excitable Neil Page is somewhat of a control freak. Trying to get home to Chicago to spend Thanksgiving with his wife and kids, his flight is rerouted to a distant city in Kansas because of a freak snowstorm, and his sanity begins to fray. Worse yet, he is forced to bunk with talkative Del Griffith, whom he finds extremely annoying. Together they must overcome the insanity of holiday travel to reach their intended destination. This is available for rent or purchase in Canada and available on Fubo TV in the United States. This is a comedy of misfortunes, yet it is still quite dramatic with great storytelling. I loved how you see the character of Neil Page, played by Steve Martin, learning to first tolerate and deal with Del, played by John Candy, and by the end showing love and compassion to him over the Thanksgiving holiday. I had figured out the twist of Del's wife being dead quite early since I paid attention to context clues, but it's still a great moment when they show Neil realizing it and reveal it to the rest of the audience who maybe hadn't quite figured it out yet. If you didn't know, this movie is rated R. The only other John Hughes film rated R is The Breakfast Club. The only reason this film is rated R is for the scene where Steve Martin's character goes full Karen on a rental car clerk, dropping plenty of F-bombs. I felt some similarities between this film and Home Alone, and that this film walked so that Home Alone could run. I rated this a 3.5 out of 5. Now let's move on to the final film I'll be talking about in this video, Uncle Buck. When Cindy and her husband Bob have to leave town for a family emergency, there's only one person available to babysit their 3 kids, Bob's lazy, carefree brother, Buck. While he immediately gets along with the 2 younger children, Buck must change his bachelor lifestyle if he wants to be a responsible caregiver for the angst-filled teenager, Tia. This is available for streaming on Starz in Canada and on Fubo TV in the United States. First of all, John Candy is so charming as Uncle Buck, although he has a slightly sadistic sense of humor. That didn't bother me though, since I really enjoy that kind of humor. It made me feel as though he could have played a comedic take on the Joker. I felt as though the character of Tia was bratty and a bit of an asshole. But this movie, like many other John Hughes films, finds a way to redeem characters and show them grow from despisable to lovable. This film is so heartwarming and hilarious that I could see myself watching it multiple more times when I need an emotional boost. I rated this film a 3.5 out of 5. Some trademarks that I noticed from John Hughes is that he used Anthony Michael Hall in quite a few of his earlier films, and that he always did a mix of comedy and drama. In some ways, that's similar then to Taika Waititi, although Taika Waititi is a newer filmmaker, and I think he maybe is inspired by John Hughes. I don't know, but maybe that's where he found his inspiration for making comedy and drama mixed together. Now let's talk about my ranking of these films. I would put at the bottom, at number 6, Weird Science. At number 5, I would put 16 Candles. At number 4, I'd put Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. At number 3, I'd put Ferris Bueller's Day Off. At number 2, I'd put Uncle Buck. And at number 1, I'd put The Breakfast Club. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me, please hit the subscribe button. If you have any suggestions or information you'd like to share, maybe some trivia on these films or your review of these films, please leave a comment down below. My next video will be a franchise review for Predator, since the prequel, Prey, will be coming out at the end of that week on August the 5th. Thanks again for watching, and remember, we are all pretty bizarre. Some of us are just better at hiding it. That's all.